Former President Trump has formally asked the Supreme Court to overturn the Colorado Supreme Court's landmark ruling and reinstate him on the state's 2024 presidential ballot after he was barred on the basis of violating the 14th Amendment's insurrection clause. The Colorado Supreme Court has no authority to deny President Trump access to the ballot, Trump's attorney wrote in the petition. By doing so, the Colorado Supreme Court has usurped congressional authority and misinterpreted and misapplied the text of Section 3. The deadline to finalize Colorado's presidential primary ballots, however, is Friday. Now, it's unlikely the Supreme Court will resolve Trump's appeal before then, meaning that Trump will likely appear on the ballots since the Colorado ruling was put on temporary hold.
Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. weighed in on Trump's removal from the ballot. Let's see what he had to say.
I've been outspoken. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump's, and that's why I'm running against him. But I think it's I've been outspoken about criticizing the Colorado decision and the Maine decisions because, we have a democracy in this country. We don't have a banana republic. At least we're not supposed to. People ought to be able to vote for who they want to vote for. I don't want to beat Donald Trump. I believe that I can beat him in an election and that I can beat him in a debate. And I want to do that fair and square. I don't want the playing fields slanted. I don't want to have an election where you get rid of a guy who, a large percentage of the American public want as their leader, and you're going to leave those people feeling angry and frustrated and justifiably so. I've read the opinions. I don't see how they can stand judicial, Supreme Court scrutiny. I don't think you can get. Donald Trump has not been convicted of leading an insurrection. Maybe he did it, but he hasn't been charged with it. He hasn't been convicted of it. So you can't really. I don't think it's fair. I don't think there's due process in punishing him for a crime that he was never convicted of.
Yeah, I really appreciate those comments from RFK Jr., not surprisingly. Frankly, I wish Joe Biden had said the same thing about his opponent. I think that would be very magnanimous. RFK Jr. wants to defeat Donald Trump and Joe Biden. He wants to debate them. He's doing well in the polls, topping 10% recently. That's very notable for a third-party candidate. We should probably spend more time at some point talking about his ballot access issues. I think we've had one of his surrogates on, Tony Lyons, to discuss them. We should go further into them because he's going to have some trouble himself getting on because the rules are very unfair to third-party candidates. I'm not faulting him or his campaign for that. It's the deep flaws in our system that is designed to protect the two-party duopoly. But yeah, I mean, he kind of outlines my own thinking about the decision. It is not to acquit Donald Trump of wrongdoing relating to the election or relating to January 6th, but just to point out that this is a subjective judgment somewhat, or a judgment that hasn't been rendered by a court fully of due process on whether Trump's actions, criminal though they may be, although that hasn't been proven yet either, are they criminal first? He's been charged, not convicted. And then are they, even if they're criminal actions, do they constitute an insurrection, is not a question for a unelected Secretary of State to arbitrarily decide.
Yeah, my objection here is only to the fact that I don't agree. I don't agree with Trump and I don't agree with RFK Jr. that the Colorado court doesn't have the authority. They have the authority to apply the constitutional rule against insurrection, just like they would have the authority to say a 12-year-old can't run for president or someone from Sweden can't run for president. Arnold Schwarzenegger can't run for president. But what the problem is that determination requires a finding of fact that has not, in fact, happened. Everybody is treating this like it's sort of a summary judgment posture. And in a summary judgment scenario, it is reliant on there being some clear, non-factual, indisputable facts on the record that you can make a decision on. Do we have a contract where I was owed this much money and this is the check that you paid and the check doesn't correspond to the money that was owed? We don't need a whole trial to figure that out. We can make a ruling in a pre-trial stage. This is a very different scenario where what is being alleged is a multi-week scheme that has over a dozen co-conspirators who are going to be called to testify to Donald Trump's complicity in all of this. it is very difficult for me to imagine that unless you're just looking at the fact of 1/6 and saying, oh yeah, he tweeted these and these people came to the Capitol and therefore that's an insurrection. Only with that mindset could you say that I'm going to be able to find that he in fact has satisfied the law here. And I think that's obviously what's going on. People are calling the acts of 1/6 the insurrection, which has always been the weakest part of Trump's case.
Shanna Bellows has very much leaned into that in her, in the documents herself, and then in her responses when asked about it on CNN and other places, has basically said, well, look at 1/6. There was violence on 1/6. That fulfills the criteria of the insurrection. But as we've pointed out, time and time again, you really have to dig into the scheme that went on in the weeks before. Associates wanting to, forge documents, hold meetings at improper times,
meetings,
those kinds of things. Where I think Trump is going to have a very hard time. Because he's going to be up against dozens of people flipping on him. You may, think that's totally unfair, but that's frankly just how the justice system works, and criminal masterminds have gone down for RICO-style things all the time, and Trump's going to be in quite a bit of jeopardy because of that. Now, I don't know, and I'm skeptical that is also what is meant by insurrection. But again, we're getting into a subjective kind of what does insurrection mean to you, that ultimately we need some kind of court body to weigh in on.
Right. Yeah. Well, meanwhile, a new investigation from House Democrats finds Trump received millions in payments from foreign entities while he was still president. Let's watch the news break on MSNBC.
Breaking news from Capitol Hill. There are new documents, they come from House Democrats, showing former President Donald Trump received nearly $8 million from 20 different foreign governments while he was in office. I want to bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles. What more can you tell us, Ryan?
Well, Chris, I just left a briefing from Democrats on the House Oversight Committee where they gave us this report. It's a 156-page exhaustive report that details only 2 years of the Donald Trump presidency, which they outline millions of dollars in payments that flowed directly from foreign governments into the various businesses that were controlled by Donald Trump and his associates. And now it's important to keep in mind that while Donald Trump was president, he did not do what other previous presidents have done and either divested his business assets outside of government or stepped down from the boards and stepped down from positions of authority in these businesses. Instead, he chose to remain involved in them. And even though his children did run these businesses, he was still directly involved or had knowledge of the day-to-day business activity that many of these different associated entities were doing while he was in office.
So according to the New York Times, among the countries patronizing Mr. Trump's properties, China made the largest total payment at $5.5 million to his business interest. Saudi Arabia was the second largest spender, shelling out more than $615,000 at Trump World Tower and Trump International Hotels. It does seem like these kinds of arguments were made in the past. I think when he was running in 2016, that there was an opportunity for all of these pay-to-play schemes, and he chose to not put up a Chinese wall, no pun intended, between him and some of these entities the way that people recommended, or Carter famously gave up his peanut farm. But even if you think
Trump
these
had a lot
are
more than a peanut farm. Right? I mean, frankly, his business empire was so sprawling and so all around the globe, and he decided to remain in charge of it. There was no way to avoid this happening, given that he had decided not to
but you can,
step down.
If you want to keep your business interests, I think that's perfectly legitimate. You work your whole life for that, but then maybe you don't get to be president. And don't we expect some level of sacrifice from the people who lead our country to not be so easily entangled in these kind of pay-to-play schemes? Now, you can say that this is superficial, not you, but
I'm not saying it's superficial at all.
One could say that this is a de minimis infraction, but given that Republicans have spent the last few years doggedly trying to make a direct connection between Donald Trump and for his foreign business interests through his son as proxy. I don't know. Hunter, what did I say?
You said Donald Trump again.
Sorry, Hunter Biden.
But I knew exactly what you meant. We can finish each other's sentences.
Yeah, that's right, Robby. But if you're trying to do it via Hunter Biden, I mean, how can you argue against when you think it's a big deal for his son to be a proxy, for Donald Trump to be himself entangled in this way?
Right, and by the same by the exact same token, how can Biden-sympathetic mainstream media people be outraged about this and uncurious about the level of Hunter Biden influence peddling going on? The correct response is that there's tremendous corruption throughout our political system, and both parties and families are at fault.
With all due respect, the difference is that despite the Republicans' best effort to find something, there has been no smoking gun connecting any of Hunter Biden stuff with Joe Biden. So that is the substantive difference.
Well,
you can say that you care about this kind of corruption, and you would care if they actually found the smoking gun with Hunter Biden, but that's still up in the air as compared to what is being described here in the New York Times.
Yeah, I mean, there's a tremendous level of verifiable influence peddling on Hunter Biden's part.
Right.
Whether it violates any law has not been established, and whether it makes Joe Biden guilty of any law.
Yeah.
Although this is also, I don't know if this violates some law, they should be prosecuted for it. But unfortunately, the check on this kind of corruption is maybe just ultimately the voters. So they can decide whether they don't want to reward Donald Trump or Joe Biden for these kinds of behaviors. More Rising right after this.